And so thank you, Nadine. The recording has already started, and it would also be helpful if you could switch off your camera, sorry, your mics when our speaker presents, so we don't have interruptions and unnecessary noise. After the presentation by our speaker, everyone can ask questions using their mic or by typing in the chat room. This should be an interactive event. That's how it is. So we encourage everyone to feel free to engage with the speaker. So once again, thank you very much for joining us. Today's seminar is delivered by Dr. Zahraa Abdallah on exploring the synergy of machine learning and healthcare advancements. A brief introduction of our speaker. Dr. Zahraa Abdallah is a senior lecturer in machine learning at the School of Engineering Mathematics at the University of Bristol. Her research interest is in machine learning, specifically time series, adaptive models, and multimodalities. Her research focuses on developing new methods of time series analysis, applying machine learning techniques to healthcare domain, and expanding learning to other modalities. She is actively involved in various multidisciplinary projects, including healthcare projects such as investigating biomarkers for earlier stage detection of Alzheimer's disease, early detection of cancer, analyzing EEG data for Parkinson's disease, and unhiding clinically unknown patterns in insulin needs for diabetics patients. Before joining Bristol University, Zahraa received her PhD from Monash University in Melbourne. She's the recipient of Holly Holman Award for Best Dissertation in the School of Information Technology for her PhD thesis. So with that, Zahraa, I welcome you to the Thought Leadership series, and feel free to start.
Thanks so much, Ashley. Thanks so much for inviting me to the talk, and thanks, Nadine. So I'll just start sharing my screen. I think you have said all, Ashley, about introducing me, but I'll briefly introduce myself and the talk in brief. So just before I start speaking, the talk is organized in themes or topics. I don't mind that stopping in between the topics and taking questions, because I think it's more, it will be more coherent to, talk about this topic before moving on to the next one. But of course, we can also have a dedicated Q&A at the end. All right, so that works. So as I was saying, I am at the University of Bristol, School of Engineering, Mathematics and Technology. I'm head of the Data Science Research Lab at Bristol, and also I am a deputy director for the MSc in Data Science. Before that, that's where the cute kangaroos are coming from. I used to live in Australia for 11 years. It's very beautiful, and the weather is good. So my area of specialty is in time series analysis and adaptive learning and multimodality, but of course I work across different disciplines in trying to do this thing. So in this talk, I will try to touch on the research aspect a little bit of what are the things that I am doing in research that can help with the application in digital health. And this is actually the main motivation I do my research, is try to use machine learning in a way to solve some complicated health problems. And this is by looking at some time series data and adaptive learning and so on. So the agenda for the talk that seemed to be long. I'll try to make it brief. I wouldn't be able to dig deep into some of the slides, but I'm happy to take questions and talk more about some of the slides. I will go briefly on them. So why time series? This is a very good question. If you are looking at the health data, it normally comes with a notion of time, and this is what the main reason that get me interested in looking at temporal data. And this temporal data can be coming from sensory, coming from ambient sensors. It could be coming from even the pumps in insulin when we are talking about type 1 diabetes. It comes from many sources, but all of these sources are considered as temporal data. And considering the temporal aspect in healthcare is very important because there is a notion of progression, and this is something that we cannot really simply plug in into any machine learning and deal with it. We need to consider how things are progressing over time, and that's why time series is important to consider for healthcare. And it's not one problem time series. Time series is, we can look at this at what are the main distinguished kind of feature in time series, or we can think about this as we have a whole time series like what we have here, and how to distinguish between different classes and time series. And we have all kind of problems like time series come in varied length, irregular sampling, multi-dimension, missing data. So this is really not a trivial problem to solve if we consider the time aspect in there. And the other thing is there is no one model that can fit all in time series. This is really a huge problem. You can look here at different kind of time series, some of the ECG in the top left, some for handwriting when people are using sensors to, sorry, the slides are moving by itself. When you get people are using the sensors to monitor their handwriting, or this is more of the spectrum time series when you have a spectrum analysis for some materials. The one on the top right is how people are using their electricity over time. And this is something that we use as well for trying to understand people behavior for health, different health monitoring. So, but as you can see, these time series are not the same. And looking at a specific time series, specific kind of model to solve all of the problems is not really realistic. So one of the things that we try to do is try to have more of like what we call a model agnostic time series. It's available in EON, which is an open source time series classification model. I will leave this. Sorry if I get this in the, because it's annoying that switch by itself. So for this time series, so for this method for time series, we try to make it more as a personalized time series, and we are simulating how the insects are looking at the world. And this is really interesting concept, because how insects are looking at the world is different from how humans are looking at the world. And with insects, we have this kind of a compound eye. The compound eye is a collection of hundreds and thousands of lenses, and these lenses are with different resolution. This is how insects actually are looking at the world. And what we are trying to do in this series of algorithms that we get co-eye first and then red comets is try to make time series algorithm that can have the same feature of zooming in and out in different time series, try to find what are the most important features. Is that more in the trend, so we need to zoom out, or it's more in this specific change, so we need to zoom in? So CoI is trying to simulate that, and we find it interesting to do it. The other thing is it's very important when we are dealing with time series for healthcare is to have an explainable aspect. Explainability has been a hot topic in general, but for some domains are much more intuitive than other domains. So if we consider this image, when we talk about explainability in these images, it's quite straightforward. We are looking at where is the main features for the dog in this picture, um, what he is, what's in his hands. So this is what we are looking at is the guitar in this case. So there are specific features that we are looking at if it's images, and it's easy to say, okay, this was important because we can see the image and we see these are the important features in the image. But for time series, it's not that trivial. It is hard really to see from this kind of time series we have here. This is actually from self-driving cars and the recording for different sensors on the car. Even if we find some interesting pattern like the one here, what does it really mean? And linking it back to the phenomena that generated this time series is a not trivial thing. And also what representation we are considering for time series. Is a frequency or in the time or the spectrum? So it is really, sorry, I'm just looking at the chat. Okay, I hope you all can see my screen. Fine. Okay. So the thing is, it is in time series, it's much more complicated than that. We need to understand what representation of the time series and what exactly in the time series that we are looking at and how it's linked back to the phenomenon. So also we try to develop some new techniques for that. One of them is try to get a common kind of representation of time series, and this is in the latent space, not in the frequency, not in the time. This is a work of my PhD student Nikas. And yeah, we are getting promising results on that. We thought this is more a common kind of dimensionality reduction at the same time as a common representation for time series. And this is promising results. If you're interested in that, the paper is on arXiv, so you can read it. It's still under review. So the other important aspect that we consider for this is data is not one thing, it's evolving over time. So health data, we cannot deal with health data as a static data. So, and the assumption that we get the training data, train the model, and use the model for prediction, this assumption is not really valid for many of the things, because model is changing over time. People behavior is changing over time. Something came like the pandemic, made everything in the baseline doesn't work. And this kind of changes is the only constant we have in life, that things are changing over time. So assuming that we rely on that, and the most powerful machine learning techniques now in action, large language models, they are not static. They are adding incremental and active learning components to make it changing over time and make it more personalized as well. So if you are familiar with the ChatGPT and what is it doing, so they are actually, whenever you start talking in one conversation, they start to know what is how do you think about this topic, and they try to adjust to fit you to give it more personalized experience. And this is exactly what we mean. It's more advanced with the language domain in the NLP society for how to make the learning more personalized, not as much in time series. And this is something that we need to consider. And this change can be something that happen in gradual time. So you might see, for example, in people's activities, it might be something that happen once off, or it can be happening over time, takes a long time to happen, or it could be something that actually sudden, someone like a fall, if we are monitoring people living in social in care house and how they are actually activities, monitoring their activities over time, and we have seen a sudden fall. This is something that considered as a sudden change, and that needs different approach to handle it. So if you are talking about deep learning models, something like detecting a novel concept, this is really underexplored topic in deep learning. So deep learning, as most of you know, is a very large kind of models with millions and millions of parameters and layers. And to be able to understand what's going on inside the network is very hard and almost impossible for some of this. And it's considered as a black box in many cases. So if you train this deep neural network on some concepts, and then, for example, in this example, we have trained it to differentiate between airplane and cars, and then you give it a frog, the deep neural network will try to match either one of these, the airplane or cars, but didn't really recognize this as a new thing that it hasn't seen before. So this is something that what we call concept evolution, and also it includes uh, recognizing any of the adversarial attacks and things that are related to security when the images change a little bit, but representing a completely different thing. So this concept is also very important for healthcare because we don't really want the models to be static, and we don't want it to learn that this is the only thing in the world and you don't accept any new concept. On the other hand, we need it to understand if there is a concept that we haven't seen before, or a class that we haven't seen before, still will be able to learn about it. So this is the kind of the non-application specific overview on the research I'm doing. I'll just pause here for a second if there is any question. I don't see the chat. Any questions in the chat before I move on? I don't think so. Okay, so should I move on to the exciting applications we use these techniques for? All right. I don't see faces. I see nothing on the chat, so I assume we're all good. Okay. Thanks for the thumbs up. All right. So one of the problems that is actually something I have been looking at for some time is looking at type 1 diabetes. And just a bit of overview of type 1 diabetes, because it's not type 2 diabetes. These are two completely different kind of concepts. So in type 1 diabetes, it's a chronic condition. Many people are suffering from it. So if you are considering Bristol, it's like half of the Bristol population in the UK. I mean, as many as half of this population across the UK are suffering from type 1 diabetes. And the problem with the type 1 diabetes is that the pancreas is not giving you enough insulin, which is how the body cannot regulate how the blood glucose level over time. And since the subjects need to inject themselves with insulin so they can maintain the right blood glucose level, so they don't get complications over them. So the technology, and this is my student Sam, he was thinking about what are the things that affect it. So the problem with that, and I think that can be an interesting discussion. GPs have their understanding of how type 1 diabetes work, and the patients have their experience of how to handle their everyday kind of thing, and they see that different patterns from the clinician, what the clinician sees. So the GP might ask patients that do this and this and that and take the decision that way, but then the patients are doing something that is completely different because they know when they need this dose and when they don't know, and then they start having this kind of um, uh, reflection on the process, and things are not really gray in this area, that what the clinician believe is the main things that affect the fluctuation of blood glucose level, and what the patient are experiencing in real life on that. And these are the different factors that we're thinking about, and this is coming from focus groups when we talked about how type 1 diabetes can be affected by other factors. So the current technology for type 1 diabetes is we have this monitoring, you might have seen it, and there is an insulin delivery to inject this. And there is a combination between this with the closed loop algorithm, when with the continuous monitoring on the body and the pump putting this, and with this closed loop algorithm, they try to inject the right insulin at the right time, right? But this is only relies on the blood glucose level. And there are other factors, as we were saying, that actually can make things different. And that's what we are have two PhD students. One is looking at what are the misconceptions about type 1 diabetes and what are the patterns that no one is actually admitting on this. And the other thing is, how can we make this smarter? So Isabella, my PhD student, she's looking at revealing these new patterns. We try to be more, try to name it as a new patterns, but it's something that we are not sure whether this is actually hidden patterns or unknown patterns, or it's still we are investigating what kind of patterns we see. So if we have a carbs on board, then we have an insulin level, and we have blood glucose level, that the very famous pattern that we see if people are eating more carbs or having more sugar, so that will increase their blood glucose level. This is the common thing, and no one is debating that. What about other stuff? When there is an insulin, is the blood glucose going high while the carbs is down? What are the other things that we can see? So we use, for this study, we use a very interesting data set. It's called an open APS data set. It's a community project. People actually used to have this closed loop system, and the data is collected for their, all of the sensors that are collecting the data on the insulin level and carbs and glucose over time, and people happily sharing this to the community so they can investigate more. It's a very big data. It's very messy data. We spend a long time in getting into that, and it's collected in free living. So you expect all of the problems in the world in this data, missingness, outliers, people are leaving the sensors, spikes. It's really, but it's rewarding at the same time. And we are really grateful that there is an effort in making this. Actually, the story of how this started is a little bit interesting, because it was a push from the patients to get this data open for public, and some hold back from the clinicians on that. But anyway, I'm not getting into that, but the data is there. And we tried to look at some of these patterns, and I'll go quickly in this slide, but these are just example of some of the patterns that we have seen, some with using some clustering of time series techniques, how things are not going as we expected in the patterns. So the other thing that Sam is looking at is adding a smartwatch to the set of sensors to look at the data. And this is actually, he collected the data, recruited participants, collected the data for that. This is a snapshot of the data collected. And we're currently analyzing this data, try to understand more on that. And we have a competition open with this data for people to look at the prediction of the blood glucose. And if you're anyone interested in your team in looking at this, that will start in November. So you can stay tuned on that. So I think that is all about type 1 diabetes I want to talk about now. So look at the chat again if there's any question before we move on to the next topic. Or if you'd like to unmute yourself and ask me any questions, if you have any questions. Okay, all good. So the other kind of condition that I'm focused on my research and the team in Bristol. Actually, this is more of a huge effort that we have been working on for Bristol started this from 2011, not specifically for Parkinson's, but for other chronic disease as well. But this is the work in Parkinson's. I will talk first about how we looked at the EEG data for Parkinson's, and then we'll talk about more of the multimodality approach for them. So Parkinson's disease is actually one of the second most common neurodegenerative disease. Neurodegenerative disease in the UK. And we got more than 130,000 people in the UK living with this, and there is no cure for it. And actually, it costs the NHS more than 350 million per year, um, to just looking at the impact on that for the social care and family care and stuff. So there is hope in controlling the symptoms of Parkinson's disease if we could detect this earlier on. And this is what we try to do in this study and different studies. So one of the projects that we're working on is looking at the EEG data that has been developed in Bristol, and try to look at how different regions in the brain is affecting how people are progressing over time with the disease. So this will help with the early detection of Parkinson's. So we looked at, and that's during sleep time. So we have looked at the sleep and the different regions of the brain. And then we try to find out if there is any interesting signs there. And we use the power spectrum time series for that, and that can have some different power bands. And from this graph, actually the most distinguished thing we can see here is this orange one is seem to be the most indicative thing of the early stage detection. And this orange one is actually N1 sleep type. This is the first stage of sleep when people are having a transition between wakefulness and sleep. So this feature is usually like a slow movement of the eye and reducing of muscle activities. And during that time, what we have seen here, this is by far the most kind of an interesting part of sleep that we can look more into any concerning signs to say that people are progressing in the disease, and we should give more attention to them. So that was an interesting, that's a work of Amarpal, my PhD student. Beyond EEG, what we're looking at is a huge project that we have at Bristol. It's called Tourist. It's an APCRC project with the 6.1 million. When we are not actually looking at EEG at all, but we are looking at people living in smart houses. And this is Tourist is a continuation or a specified project for Parkinson's that built on a success of a sphere. So we have a Sphere House. If you come down to Bristol at any point, we can take you to a tour there. So Sphere House is a smart house in Bristol. It looks like a normal house from the outside, but it is actually a smart house from the inside. You can see that we have different sensors, videos, and people are having wearables as well. The aim for Sphere at the beginning was to try to find out whether there is anything interesting we can see from people's activities and what kind of modalities that are most important stuff. But then we carried on many pilot studies with patients with knee replacement surgery to monitor how they recover. And we got also pilot study for people with Parkinson's and with Alzheimer. So it was a very rich platform to try many things in a sphere. And then Taurus came. So Taurus is, as I was saying, this is a continuation or a specification for sphere looking only for Parkinson's. And the idea for Taurus is we are monitoring again with this Rich Century platform, but to give a chance for clinical trials. So instead of people are going, have to go away for a few days or weeks and months at some time for some clinical trials. So we can offer them to do this in Taurus House when they go and spend some time there. And this data is actually gathered and collected and analyzed to see how the clinical trial is doing what it's supposed to do, and do a good analysis for them. So this is actually what we think is the future for clinical trials, and this is something that needs a lot of work from the machine learning community to meet the demand in how we can collect this information, and we can analyze it, we can reach some kind of interesting insights on that. So hope the videos will work. Okay, let me see. So these are examples of the sensors we have in Sphere. So this is the video one. So these are people living in the house. We got some silhouettes in this video. So they are actually using the silhouette data to analyze the video. I'm just jumping through the video, so you don't have to look at all the details in there. Also, we got other, this is from the wristband. When the people are wearing something like smartwatch, of course, all of these sensors will be updated for tourists because the technology has moved on. So but these are the kind of sensors that we are using in the house. And lastly, we have ambient sensor. When we get some so we have motion sensors, and we do have also data collected from smart meters to see how people are using electricity over time. So all of this information is collected from the smart house in the ambient sensor, try to make it in very non-intrusive way so people can live their life without really thinking about they need to wear an EEG something to get this data across, but they do this in more non-intrusive way. So the big question on this is about the privacy, and this is a very important question when it comes to machine learning. And the way that we are thinking about this project is all of this data will be pushed to the cloud, and the data is not used to for not individual data will be used for analysis. It will be what we called a federated learning approach, when we have a centralized that collects all the data, crunch all the data up, getting insights, and then federate the learning across personalized experience. So each individual will have their own model that's not shared with the cloud on personalized data, but at the same time, you have a centralized model that knows everything about everything. So federated learning, for example, is used for data correction of typing in your phone. So when you have a centralized, when you start writing in your phone, if you have a completely new account, it doesn't really recognize your phrases at the beginning, your specific language that you are using, and then after some time it start to have better prediction of what you are going to say in a message and give you some relevant recommendation. So this is an example of federated learning. On the cloud, they have the generic thing that applies for everyone as a starter, and then it can be personalized for each individual. And then what we learned from this individual, without revealing lots of information about this individual, it's more of like parameters will be sent to the centralized one to get the knowledge across to everyone. So this is what we are started to do in this project and machine learning part. Any questions? Yeah. So I think that the project in Parkinson's, it's really a huge one with the collaboration with Newcastle. They have a very interesting kind of experience, like what we have Sphere in Bristol. They have mobilized D when they did very similar kind of thing, but not in a smart house, but people were wearing belts to collect sensors. And this is more than in a free living style. And what we do in this project is we get the team from the Newcastle with their experience in Mobilize D, and team in Bristol with their experience in Sphere, and try to get to the specific more on Parkinson's and push that, developed on that. And the team have lots of people from different background, from of course machine learning side, but also from a clinician side. This is most important because we are not really we are working in very multidisciplinary kind of project. We need a balance between representative of different disciplines. So any questions about this before I move on to the last or second last topic? I'll go very quickly for this last two. But another kind of an important question that we're trying to figure out in one of the projects is how to detect a specific type of cancer early on. And there's a lot of focus on some of the cancer types, but there is less focus on some of the others. So in this project, what we're trying to investigate is something that hasn't been really given much attention, is looking at an oral cancer and early signs of lung cancer as well. And this is when we look at this, the landscape is it's not something that we can overlook. It's still a huge percentage of cancer in that, and there are some sample of participants that are on a common risk of that, something like if people are smoking, if they are having excessive use of alcohol, so they are more at risk for these types of cancer. The thing is, looking at this is sometimes hard because you are not you don't want again to get people to do lots of tests. We already have lots of pressure on the primary care. We don't want to make these routine tests more. We don't have a capacity to do this in primary care, and things are really needed to be addressed early on, otherwise it will be too late. So one of the things that this project is trying to do is try to develop a smart toothbrush when people can actually do this in something that people are doing every day. They brush their teeth, and then they can put it on a base to transmit all the information on the saliva kind of biomarkers and send it to a server to do some machine learning techniques to detect if there is any concerning signs of that. And if there is, they will be called out for other tests. So this is actually an idea that we were thinking of doing, and we actually started developing a prototype of that. So already the prototype is somewhere ready. It's not as a toothbrush yet, but it's with the swap. And the team is actually working in two things. First, we need to decide what are these biomarkers, what are we looking at, because this toothbrush need to target some of the things that are concerning or something that we need to look more closer to. And the other stream is for the engineering side, when they develop the material that can capture this biomarker. So we are a team across the UK, from Sheffield, Manchester, Swansea, Bristol, and we are looking at developing this. And we actually recruited lots of participants as well, patients in control and with cancer in and collect their saliva samples for validating some of the biomarkers. So this is an APCRC and Cancer Research UK project that I'm working on at the moment. The very last thing is completely different from what I have been talking. It is more on the synthetic side of biology, but it is very important because not everything that we can get the data for, not everything that we can make it trust the data on, and not everything can be tested. So synthetic biology is something that it has been coming very fast in research, and how people are using this synthetic biology to to get more insights into different things without actually collecting the data for them. And one of the famous models for that, it's a mathematical model that has been built to simulate how different genes are working and different cells. And this model actually is something that built using thousands, I don't think it's thousands, it's like 100,000 of equations to build, but at the same time, it's not validated. So the team at Stanford have built this one, and it is something that try to understand more how different cells are across different generations are living for some time. So how machine learning can help with that? Actually, this is the work of Kirim, my PhD student. He is looking at how to represent this as graphs and try to understand how different genes at different generations are essential and non-essential. And this is using a graph attention model for the transformer. And also using Sargo model, because this is a very complex model. And we have found very interesting results on that. So machine learning has a big potential to help with synthetic biology. This is what we learned so far. We're trying to make this more understandable results. I think a big thing in this is the overlap between the machine learning community and synthetic biology community. And it's not an easy task to achieve, but there is a big potential there. So I will stop here and thank you for listening. I hope I left 10 minutes for question, more than 10 minutes. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Zahraa, for this enriching and insightful presentation. So the floor is open for questions. Anyone, any questions for Zahraa, please feel free to use your mic, and you can also type in the chat room. Any questions?
So as people thinking about questions, it's not so there is a question here. So two things that are happening in Bristol actually could be very useful, and not really at Bristol only. This is LEAP hub, that is an EPCRC hub in digital health, if people are interested in joining. So we have lots of networking events and connections, so you can check the website for that. And also we got a couple of CDTs at Bristol for practice-oriented AI and synthetic biology CDT. So if you get any student interested. And we have a question, right?
Yes. Thank you. So we have Nadine and then Hoda Ibrahim. I hope I'm pronouncing your name properly. So Nadine, please.
Should we start with Huda first, just to give her priority,
Huda,
and then
okay.
I will go ahead, Huda. Ask your question, please.
Thank you. This was really impressive. Thank you, Dr. Zahraa. It was really impressive. Thank you. I'm just asking about how can we use the time series for images, not for signals? How we can use it for images?
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Hoda. This is an interesting question. So the time series is to represent a temporal pattern. Okay. So I think what we need to know. So do you mean videos or images?
No, I mean images. I think it is the same because videos, it's like a frame of images. So
yeah. So it's an interesting question because people try to do it the other way around. They try to convert the time series to images so they can actually apply different methods of images, because images is something that has been studied very well. I mean, there are lots of deep neural network techniques that can work with images. But getting an image in time series, again, it depends on the domain, what we understand from the domain, what is the temporal aspect we try to represent. Is that the sequence of pixels, or you're looking at specific object into the image that you want to have a sequence that represent this object? So it depends on what is the context of the image and what temporal aspect you want to present as a time series. But once you know this, it's a straightforward thing that the image has some pixels and how to represent these are different dimensions, and the dimensions can be represented as time series, and you put this in the notion of time that you think that most appropriate for the domain.
So for example, for cancer, if we're looking for a cancer, either on CT scan, MRI, endoscopy, and so on, so how can I start to figure out or to use the time series with the dataset or the images?
So in this domain, I think that the interesting thing will be the different scans at different times, and how to connect between the biomarkers that you can see. So what you see from the image is the biomarker, and then how to connect between different biomarkers based on when these scans has been taken, but not particularly using time series for images. I don't see a specific use case for that, but I see that there is a temporal aspect in how the scans are taken, and considering these biomarkers as time series will be interesting to consider.
So it's better to look for the progress for a biomarker, for example.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Many thanks. It's really impressive. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Ada. Yes.
There's
Razana.
another Razana. Yeah, go ahead, please, Razana.
Thank you for your presentation. It was